Well, I'm going to take another chance on spring. It is very nice outside. It's a little colder in the barn. Just a little bit of show and tell. I want to go back to the timber framing. I found some books that I thought would be worth showing to you. These are very good. These are very good. This is a modern, I don't know at what point it's at the best focus, modern, readily available books about the art of timber framing. If you decided, hey, I want to learn how to do that and get the tools, there you go. Steve Chappell. This is in America. Now, I imagine that in Europe there's quite something, quite another school. But this book I really wanted you to see. My sister gave me this, and I am so indebted to her for that. She saw it, and she just thought of me, and she was so right. I'll try to open it in a moment. It's called Wooden Houses, and it's about the houses in Europe. Switzerland, Germany, Scandinavia. And you can see the brick infill. My house is a very crude example of that. I've worn the book apart. I mean, when I go to open it, the pages are all falling apart because I've used it so much and studied it so much, and I didn't know just what part to show you. But I think over on your left here, this one, if you could see that, these are in Switzerland. Switzerland, Austria, that's where you see houses like that. That one fascinates me because the boards, I'll tell you and then I'll come in. The boards are nailed on the inside of the framing, not the outside. Now here in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of barns that are timber frame, but they always put the boards on the outside. I think it's in the wrong place, and that's a shocking idea. Maybe later I'll try to explain why that is, but I think the board should be on the inside. So there are some examples that I have of it. Remember, though, if you really could get such a book, there's the best that I have ever seen on the subject. I showed you that already. All right, enough show and tell. I mentioned Chaucer, and I said when I was speaking English, you probably would have trouble understanding it. Heard. Oh. Well, there's a reason I did that. There was also a nun a prioressa, or when I said one that opera with his shore sorte, I said you probably can't understand that. If you hear it, if you saw it written, then you probably could. The reason for that is the printing press, movable type. Our system of spelling English sort of froze about 500 years ago, when Middle English was the language. So we spell modern English as if it were Middle English. It's a reason why English is so hard to read and to learn to spell. Sounding in moral virtue was his specie. We would say was his. The nun, prioressa, that off here smealing. We say UV, we say of now, not off. But we spell it the way it was in Middle English. The word night is the one that I always use as an example, knicht. It must have been the way they spelled it. They spelled it the way it sounded back in the days of Caxton and his printing press. All right, we're going to move out of the Middle Ages. By tomorrow, we're going to be out of them. And I want to offer you some things. I don't know whether to call these classics or history or characteristics. I would just make a new tab in your notes, which would be the 18th section, page 18.10 maybe by now. Some things that ended the Middle Ages. There are other things too. I tried to give you the impression that the Middle Ages was a time of very little change, about 500 years and not that much changed, or things changed so slowly. But all of a sudden then stuff started to change. Well, gunpowder was one of the reasons. I don't know if that's widely known, but I never really understood why guys stopped wearing armor, suits of armor and jousting. What ended that? A gun. You could just shoot him a knight because a gun would go right through that armor. So the armor became useless. That was also the reason that the castles, they stopped building castles. With cannons You could bombard a castle and destroy it. Oh, I should have put in here too the trebuchet. Somewhere you could put it in here. The trebuchet is something that has currently become a fascination to so many people. It was a weapon that was able to throw monstrous big boulders hundreds of yards. And it could ultimately bash a castle down too. So that ended the knights and the castles. The castles are there still, but no point in building them anymore. Movable typeface. Well, people usually say the printing press. I think William Caxton is the one who's the most famous, at least in England. Gutenberg. Oh yes, of course, in Germany. Gutenberg, more famous yet. And I will tell you about that, I guess tomorrow. Movable typeface, the printing press. Well, now, I should have written this in there more, maybe. Before that, a book had to be handwritten, and that took a long time. And there was really only one book that was worth doing that to, and that was the Bible. And for hundreds and hundreds of years, men spent their lives copying the Bible by hand. Tomorrow I'm going to have more to say about that subject, so I'll go a little faster now. But the point with it is, once they figured out you could move typeface around and reuse it, and print hundreds and hundreds of pages, copies of a single page, that made books cheap. You didn't have to be fabulously wealthy to own a book. And that meant knowledge could begin. If you could get a book and gain knowledge from the book, instead of just having to find somebody who knew and ask them if they'd tell you, you could actually get knowledge from a book. Knowledge became accessible and cheap. In the modern day, the internet has done a similar thing. Suddenly there's more information available, more easily available than you could ever use. Well, with the printing press, that began to happen. Printing press, the discovery of the New World. I put the year 1492 there because Americans memorized that. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue is a rhyme. 1492, Columbus. It's tetrama. Anyway, the discovery of the New World. I'm always tempted to say invasion of the New World because, boy, the people lived here already, and this was an invasion. But I said discovery because from the European standpoint, here was a new world. It is so well named there, New World. In the Middle Ages, they thought they knew everything, all the plants. And here was a whole other world out there with other plants, other animals, other people, other languages. Maybe there were other things that they didn't know. And it began to sort of loosen up that idea that everything was already known. Extremely influential. The Protestant Reformation, well, 1517. There's one of those years I just memorized. I don't know why. It's so important. A guy by the name of Martin Luther, he was a priest. We'd call him a Catholic priest, a monk now, and he took on the Pope. He had 95 ideas. A thesis is an idea. And he made a list of 95 things that he thought were wrong with the Roman Catholic Church. And remember, Christendom had been united. You had no choice. Of course you were a Christian and you were a Roman Catholic. There was no other way to be. But he risked his life, nailed that list on a church door in Wittenberg, Germany, and amazingly was not burnt at the stake. That's what would have happened and did happen to so many people before that if they dared to question what the Catholic Church said. Well, that broke things loose in a major way. Again, tomorrow I'll say more about that. I'm not really prepared today to do that. But there was also John Calvin. He's another one. John Calvin was Swiss. He was German. John Calvin was Swiss, and he tried to make Geneva, Switzerland, the perfect city on earth. And from his thinking and teaching, John Knox took ideas to Scotland, and they appeared here in America. So these are very influential events that you can then trace through the next 400 or 500 years. But my point here is that these broke things loose, and before you know it, people began to think in new ways. All right, finally, there is a documentary called The Story of English. I've mentioned it before, earlier in the year. The Story of English. Before I get any further away from Chaucer, I want to mention it. Robert McNeill did this. It's on YouTube. There are 9 hours of it. And the second episode is called The Mother Tongue. The Mother Tongue. I don't know exactly how it goes in chronological order, but his discussion of Chaucer is obviously much finer than what I offered, and you can get to hear more of Chaucer and more about the printing press, Caxton's printing press as well. So The Story of English on YouTube, Mother Tongue. It's the second episode, and you might have to look at maybe the third or fourth part that's on there. All right, just one video again today, a rather long one, I know. See you tomorrow.